thank you everyone for attending the Microsoft and Geek Girls Coffee webinar. So my name is Katrina and I have here with me Pip Marlowe, Michelle Tia, Andrew, Damana, Suzanne. And they will all give a brief introduction of themselves when we get into the content of our webinar. So we have a lot of questions that you guys have contributed, which we're very thankful for, and we hope to be able to open up the webinar to an interactive Q&A session later. All right, so as a brief getting to know you question, I'd like to ask all of you, what are you reading at the moment? Pip, can I start with you?
The Australian Financial Review every day. I am an avid newsreader, so I do have to say I start every day looking at my Twitter feed and my favourite news feeds to see what's going on in the world. I have just, at the behest of my children, finished reading with my eldest daughter the Hunger Games trilogy. It's fun to do that together. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Want to see the movie?
Oh, yes. I've got an 11-year-old. Sometimes you've got to read these things.
Michelle, what are you reading at the moment?
Well, I also read the news fairly avidly most of the day, and there's always something that's coming up. But mine's probably a little less interesting than the Hunger Games, although it's interesting to me. I have a mentor who's just finished a book on the biography of Harry Messel, who was a prominent scientist in Australia. So he ran an international school of science a number of years ago when I think I was probably still at school, but that's what I'm reading. He was a physics professor.
Very good. Suzanne, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here. All right. Yeah, so having just moved to Sydney a while ago, what I'm reading right now is the Good Food Guide for Sydney. It's a book that has probably like 200 or 300 pages full of restaurants and cafes in Sydney.
Fantastic. And you found some good restaurants, I'm sure?
Yeah, there's really a lot of good food in Sydney, I have to say.
Fantastic. Damana, could we jump over to you? What are you reading at the moment?
I read about 10 things at the same time, but I'm focusing on a book that's all about agile software development with Visual Studio. And then on the side, in my fun time, I'm reading about a vampire necromancing killer. I'm on the 10th book of the series. There's 21 books. And
wow.
I absolutely love it. I read it about every fourth book. I go back to that series and read a book. So they call it vampire chick lit. So yeah, that's what I'm reading.
Excellent.
21 books, that's commitment. And what are you reading, Andrew?
Well, I spend most of my time reading online, and clearly I spend too much time on LinkedIn. I was just nominated in the top 1% profiles globally as most seen. So I'm very...
I got that too. Yeah.
Too much time clearly on that side. But I spend a lot of time on a site called ERE.net, ERE.net, and it's a really cool recruitment site which has lots of articles and resources and information around staffing issues. So probably I spend most of my reading time there.
Fantastic. And we're really looking forward to seeing some of your insights around recruitment and staffing. Just as another icebreaker question, one thing that we'd also like to know is what do you always have to carry in your handbag?
I'd be lying if I said I didn't have my phone with me everywhere I go. Multiple reasons. I want the kids to contact me. I do use spare 5 minutes anywhere to maybe triage email, send a text, do a little bit of online shopping, and so it's my telephone.
I always have my telephone, but I always have perfume. Always. Just in case.
That's a good tip. That is a good tip.
Do you have perfume, Andrew?
No perfume. I'm a pen nut, so I have a collection of boutique handmade pens. This is one that I built myself with all special. Well, it's all the insides have been retrofitted with special colours and sizes and types of ink. So can't do without my pen. I always carry it around.
Wow. Suzanne, what about you? What do you always have in your handbag?
Definitely the Surface, because that is my e-reader and it carries my music, but I think also my phone.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Damana, what about yourself?
I'm the same, always my phone, and because of the nature of my job, I always have my passport.
Wow. Fantastic. So we'd love love to hear more about the travelling nature of your job later on as well. So that's great. One thing that a lot of the Geek Girls said that they were interested in hearing about was the different roles that there are in the ICT sector and what is their connection with different personality or education profiles. So, Andrew, from HR, what's your perspective on this question?
Well, this is a common question we get when we go out on campus and talk with young people. I'm studying X, and what does that mean I'm qualified for? Or I'm this type of person, where does that fit in the organisation? And to be honest with you, there's really not much correlation between what people study and where they end up in our organisation. Even those people who are doing hardcore, software development courses or IT, we see them ending up in all sorts of different places in technology. So the first comment is it really doesn't matter what you study. We have a lot of people who have no technology background going into deep technical roles. Some of our best young interns and grads have marketing backgrounds or non-technical backgrounds and have gone into deep technical roles. So it can help, but it's not a necessary thing to study a certain thing to get you somewhere. Personality, I think technology has so many interactions with the world that you can have people who are very introverted, extroverted, people who have a high ability to look at numbers and be very numeric, through to people who are very good at communication. It's such a broad career that it really can take all sorts. So, again, difficult to say this type of person is going to do well in technology. And Michelle, we were discussing earlier what sort of roles there are. Technology rules the world in so many ways and has so many interactions with society, with business, with so many aspects of human endeavour that really there's such a broad array of careers. Of course, you've got the software development test. You've got moving further down the food chain, implementation, delivery, consulting, sales, marketing. Thousands and thousands of different potential careers in the one area which is commonly known as ICT. So I really, as an example, when we go out on campus, we always indicate that we accept any student from any faculty in any part of our business. So it's very broad.
Okay. Michelle, what's been your experience with the alignment between what you studied and what you're doing now?
So I studied economics and science. So I had, some part of a computing degree, but I would never call myself a programmer by any stretch of the imagination. I guess, the career that I have is really about how I problem solve things for people, and whether that's a customer's, business problem on how they're, doing their customer service. Technology's always been the enabler. So, my degree, apart from the fact that my father insisted that I do accounting, it's probably the only thing that I use day to day because I have to understand profit and loss and balance sheets and all those types of things. But there's very few things out of my degree that I would use every day. It is a way of thinking. It is a way of knowing that, people can organise themselves and get something done, and that's really what I look for in a degree. I'm not looking at the highest marks or the lowest marks, looking for the ability to complete something.
Sure. It's interesting when you talk about problem solving, that's like 21st century learning. It's not about, the way I talk about it, it's not about content, it's about competency. When you are learning, be it at school or university, they're actually teaching you to learn, teaching you to resolve problems, teaching you to collaborate, teaching you creative thinking. I think, from a Microsoft perspective, when I recruit for those competencies and the ability to do those well. Because if you have a great person who can do those things, you can teach them content. Content, I think, is the easiest part of it, but those competencies are the things that I think are the things that we look for as we recruit.
Definitely. Suzanne, you're on the line. As one of our graduates who's recently been at university, what's been your experience with the alignment between what you studied and what you're doing now?
Well, there's definitely some alignment to what I studied. So I got my bachelor's degree in business administration. So that's where I have, like a general management and business background and where the marketing comes in. And then my master's degree was more technical. I got my master's degree in information science. So that's where the technical part comes in. But I agree with the speakers before me who said that while you do learn a lot in university, the most you really learn is, in your job and while you're doing what you're doing.
great. Damana, I want to jump over to you, and I want to ask you, from your experiences, do you think a career in ICT is a straight path?
I'm probably one of those people that it was actually a very straight path for me. And also one of those freaks who works in exactly what I'm qualified in. My degrees are in pure maths and computer science. I work in a deeply technical role though, and I work in a very conceptual role. So yes, my career after coming out of university, I became a programmer, and I've just built myself up as a programmer over those years. So 13 years now, and I, work as a specialist in my area. So absolutely, it was straight for me, but pretty much everyone else I ask says no way. So it depends, I guess.
Okay, so I think now would be a good time to jump into one of the audience poll questions. If you're on your computer, just have a look at your screen to see if you can see our poll question. And we just wanted to ask this to get an idea of how our audience was made up, whether you guys are working in the ICT industry, or whether you're studying, or whether you're working in an area that's different to ICT. So thanks for the votes coming through. I can see them. Okay, great. So a lot of you are studying and not working in the ICT industry. One of you is studying while working in ICT, which is great. And a few of you seem to be working full-time as well. That's fantastic. So during the interactive Q&A session, we would love it if before each of your questions you just gave like a brief overview of whether you're studying, what you're studying, and whether you're in the ICT industry. So that was really helpful to help us learn more about you guys so that we can...
Can I make some comment around that one? Yeah, it's being in staffing, I'm always passionate about getting people into the career that they have some passion around. And it's sad to see that 33% aren't doing any engagement at all. And, if I can encourage those people on the line who aren't working in ICT to find some way to connect, it places you so much better with respect to what you're learning and how it can be used in real life. So getting that connection, finding a way to get a job, working in the industry that you're passionate about will really give you so much more direction around your studies. And often, actually, after all that study, I realised it's not the area I want to be in. It's good to figure that out early rather than late. So encourage people to jump into internships or some way to connect what they're doing at school with the real world.
At the same time, it's good to see people studying and working in a variety of industries. I mean, if I had joined this webinar 18 months ago, I would have picked not working in the ICT industry because I was a court reporter at that time. So exploring different career paths can be really useful for knuckling down. Fantastic. So I'll leave that up for a while. I'd like to talk about whether your experiences in ICT have been a straight road.
Who are you giving that one to?
I would like to answer it. Would you like to have a go?
Yeah, look, I'll give some thoughts. Definitely not a straight road, and certainly not even a road for me that I always planned. Okay, so I think for me, as I think about career planning, as I've got older, I have probably been more thoughtful than when I was younger. Some key things that have helped me be a little bit more thoughtful is to have great mentors or managers who have challenged me to think about what I could do, what my potential was. And in some cases, they believed in me before I believed in myself. And I think that is important, as young women in the workforce, that you find people out there who really believe in you and help you, because they will encourage you to think, think that you can do more than you think yourself. I think it's important. And I think the other thing I learned, because it wasn't a straight road and it wasn't always a road I planned, is I think it was beneficial for me to be open to what I call emergent opportunities. So even when I did start to plan things, other opportunities came along that I never thought about. Maybe those opportunities didn't exist before, and market changes swiftly, new roles always coming open and being defined, and not being closed-minded to the potential of that sort of unplanned opportunity was really important for me as well.
Okay, fantastic. And you mentioned that some people believed in you before you believed in yourself. So self-perception can be really important when it comes to developing your career. Do you think self-perception has affected your career outcomes?
Look, Yes and no. And this is a little bit, I think, about, you and I talked a little bit about even like imposter syndrome to an extent. And I would lie if there are times that I've, even held myself back because I've thought I don't fit a certain mold. Or as I've been in a scenario, I haven't looked at myself and questioned, should I really be here? And I don't believe other people in that room are sitting there looking at me going, I'm not sure Pip should be here. I am actually doing that to myself. And I think certainly as women and often as minorities, we actually have to not erode our own self-confidence. Many of the scenarios I go into, and especially in this role, I'll be the only woman in the room. I will be the only woman, maybe even especially the only woman from IT, if it's, a multi-industry environment, a member of the Business Council of Australia, 108 CEOs, from Gail Kelly in Westpac to the heads of the mining companies, all of those, 108 members, 5 are female. So it's hard not sometimes to go, actually I'm not looking around the room seeing role models and maybe those traditional symbols of comfort. And so you have to actually get over those insecurities. And actually, where I got to probably after year 1 in this role is actually instead of almost rebelling against them, is actually embracing them and thinking what a great opportunity it is to actually role model that you can be a woman and do that and sort of take the responsibility angle of that minority versus the insecure angle of being in the minority.
That's good. Michelle, do you have any experiences around how your self-perception's affected your career?
I think self-perception, and I think women tend to underplay. They don't stand up and say, I can do. Sometimes they wait to be invited, and they wait for somebody else to show that they have faith in you. So having good mentors and people who believe that you can do whatever it is that you want to do, and from a young age, my parents taught me that, whatever you want to be, you can be, but your confidence level as you go through, and yes, I've lived in the ICT industry when I was the only female, and there was always, some smart comment or whatever. You had to get past that and then just step forward. So, I think I probably didn't put my hand up as much as the guys would put their hand up. And I also looked for things that, I was learning something. As I developed my career when I was younger, okay, I've done that. I want to do something different. I want to learn something. But I guess as I got older, I worked out the things that I enjoyed doing as well. And people at Microsoft know me for that I love customers, working with customers. And if my job doesn't have that component in it, then I'm not very happy doing it and I'm not very confident doing it. So you've got to play to your strengths and know what you are good at and represent yourself that way and you'll go a lot further.
Thank you. Damana, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any stories or experiences around imposter syndrome and your own self-perception and self-confidence?
Well, one thing I wanted to add to what Michelle said is about how women undersell themselves. There's a great analogy or story that I use when I talk to young women, and it's that if a selection criteria with 10 points on it about what you need for a job comes out, a woman will look at it and say, I've only got 9, I'm not going to apply. And then a man will look at it and say, I've got 2, this is totally my job. And that is a very, very common thing. I had a lot of mentors who were men, actually, and who were very supportive, as well as women, who would just say to me, oh no, you can do that. And that encouragement from both the men and the women around me really helped. And the other thing is, what other people have said as well, if you find something you're very good at, and you keep succeeding at it, that gives you a lot of encouragement. So if you pursue something that you like and that you're good at, then it can change the way you think about yourself for sure.
Definitely. And I saw Andrew smiling and nodding as you were telling that story about the recruitment criteria. I mean, have you seen that come through from a recent...
Yeah, it's very, very common that, somebody will be so perfectly matched for the role and they just won't have the confidence. There'll be literally 1 or 2 things that they think, I'm just not quite there. And it's quite sad in some cases where, clearly somebody who's probably overqualified for the role sees themselves as not being ready yet. It can be frustrating from an internal mobility perspective when you're trying to encourage great talent to move into new and interesting opportunities. So that mentoring piece, I think, is critical to develop the belief and encourage people. Yep, you can do that. You've got the skills. Don't worry.
Definitely. I think now that segues quite nicely into one of our second poll questions, which is around what industry can do to help women who are trying to find a career in IT. So let me know if you can see those poll questions. What is the best way for companies in the IT industry to engage women?
Votes coming in.
Okay, yeah, a lot of people choosing career mentoring and coaching. I mean, not just having female mentors, but male mentors as well, who could be very useful. Other suggestions? I'd love to, who voted for other suggestions? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'd love to hear what those suggestions might be.
Shall I open up the...
Yeah.
Okay,
It is me.
Oh, for team?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Did you want to come off mute? And if you feel comfortable, just let us know what kind of suggestions do you have for IT companies to engage with young women.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us?
Yes, yeah.
Fantastic.
Actually, I have a suggestion for the university mostly because I can see it in my university as well. We have some career hub, events in our university. I'm from AU. And then they do collect some resumes and CV and this kind of stuff. And then some of the companies call you afterward. But it happens really rare. It's like, most of the companies just come to our uni for once in a year. And as well as I guess that the other problem is that they mostly looking for one job, which is, I guess, in my department going to be computer scientist. But as you said, there are lots of other jobs that we can do, like, user experience or design interface, but they don't, I guess, looking for user experience or other jobs in our community. So I suggest more career events in the university could help, and as well as looking wider than just looking for software engineer in the universities, like especially computer science department, as I know.
That's very true. I think that's a really good suggestion, and something a lot more companies can do is to engage more with the universities so that link between the university and industry exists.
Yeah, exactly.
To make that transition.
It's an interesting dilemma because in other parts of the world, the US is a great example, very strong connectivity between companies and schools. They have, Dartmouth College has a whole faculty that's been sponsored by a certain business, and single individuals are donating a lot of money to hospital schools. There's a lot more connectivity with community and with business in other parts of the world. I think in Australia we are a bit behind in that, mainly because it's probably been so easy to get a job for so long. So my advice to those people who would like better engagement is don't wait for it, because it probably isn't going to happen that quickly. It's get involved in clubs and groups which engage directly with those businesses. We are quite active in engaging with those parts of the schools that have interest in our area, but it will be many years, unfortunately, sadly, before business truly engages to the level that we may wish.
Mm. Okay, thank you. So someone has asked, Miss Wyatt has asked, would you mind showing us the results? So I have shown the results to everyone, and just give me a quick message to let me know you can see them. Okay, fantastic. All right, thank you. So because of that discussion around university and how companies can engage universities, it brings us to a very interesting question around, are tertiary qualifications essential to succeed in ICT? And so what are your thoughts, just around the table here?
Okay, I'll go first. I don't think they're essential, but I think as we talked before, the skills that you develop in learning, in the competencies that we require, it's a way of showing a company like Microsoft that you have those skills. So I think, if you can show that you can achieve and that you can do the things that you need to, stick to something, as Pip said, we can teach you the content. But how you apply yourself, those types of things are things that often a tertiary qualification will give you. If I'm looking for a software engineer, more than likely that's where I would look, because I need that absolute detailed skill. But if I'm looking for a salesperson, I may not necessarily look there. I may look in all sorts of different places. So it's not necessary. I think it's useful, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I know a lot of companies these days have it as a prerequisite to be able to apply. I know many years ago places like Siebel and places like that always had that sort of stuff, and you couldn't get past the first gate. But I'm not thinking that that's actually the situation these days. So my answer is no, I don't believe you necessarily have to.
But I agree with Michelle. I think there's certain roles where there are certain pieces of skill. Like if you're going to be a doctor, you need to get a degree. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah?
I went to TAFE.
But I cut it. And to Michelle's point, there are some certain roles that holds higher weight. But I think that's sort of in the minority versus majority. I mean, we've got one of our, I think of one sales manager here. I remember interviewing him. He basically, after he left school, we ended up doing doing surfing, working in a surf shop, and is now, one of our sales directors looking after our financial services business. Not egregious. I mean, he has got interpersonal skills, he's how to solve a problem, he's got a relentless drive, and he's got those things that we look for. So what I don't want to do is undersell, obviously, higher learning. It's really important. I think it does demonstrate, many things. It is not the only thing. And we put it down. I looked at our JDs. It's preferred, in a lot of things, but we don't not hire, because of that. And I think these days you've got to reimagine what the roles are like. I was at a high school in Maryland. It's a pretty disadvantaged community, and there's some tough area, and they're going through some real struggles. But I was talking to a girl who's an artist, and I said to her, have you ever gone to a website and said it's beautifully designed? Or have you ever played a game or an application and said, wow, that's really beautiful? I said, you've got to think about how your art skills can transform in a digital economy. We are looking for great artists, and they might land in marketing, they might land in development and design.
Right.
Yeah, one of my best friends, works in our studio in the US, and some of the creative people, they have just drawing beautiful images and imagining things. I mean, creativity is a skill in itself. I'm not sure you can always put a degree and make somebody creative. There are natural inclinations and strengths people have, and I think Michelle talked a little bit before, is play to your strengths, know what you're good at, and lead with that, and that'll come through.
It is tough because most of the large tier 1 corporates, they have such a brand presence on campus that they do get an avalanche of applications from students, and it's a very natural reaction. And me being a staffing manager, we go out on campus, we're going to get not hundreds but thousands of applications. So how do you make sense of that madness? And unfortunately, many companies make the decision, well, let's start to cut down by school, and let's start to cut down by HD, then D, then, credit. That sort of thing does happen. And Pip's dead right that in the longer term, the School of Life is just as fantastic place to learn as any institution. But for those people who are looking for jobs right out of school, I would have to say that large companies will try and get people who have been through a large educational institution experience like a university, because it is in some ways similar. Some of the processes are similar. So it is not impossible, but it's certainly easier to get into those tier 1 corporates straight out of the bat if you are at a uni. But I totally agree. Some of the best talent we have, I call it wild talent. Some people literally, started programming straight out of high school, never went to uni.
Programmers ever, that's good. And I do think, Andrew's making a point that for me lands as, if you don't have that as a credential out of uni, then generally you would probably have to have some work experience that would get you into us. You'd have to demonstrate it, that in a working environment you can be successful, and we would look at that as just as equitable, foot in the door, work experience or, university experience.
I'd love to sort of draw this conversation towards some of the barriers and the challenges that face women in particular in the workforce in general or in ICT. And Suzanne, if you're on the line, I know you're one of our early career sort of employees, part of our graduate program. Have you ever felt that you have been held back in your career because of your gender or held back in studying? And if so, what did you do to overcome this?
Yes, so I have to say now that I work at Microsoft, I don't think that gender really is an issue, especially in our Australian team. There's just as many women as men in the company, but I can share an experience from when I went to school, and I went to uni in Germany, and I would say that out of a group of 30, 40 students, we only really were 5 girls. So that was really different and a really different experience. And yeah, there were some perceptions against women and myself. The guys just looked at the girls and thought, well, what are you doing here? I think you're in the wrong classroom. And I have to be honest, in the beginning it was really tough and I didn't know how to handle this situation. But like what Pip said and Andrew mentioned and Michelle mentioned this as well, it's really, you have to surround yourself with the right people. And I think it was around that time that I had a mentor, a role model, a woman that works in the information sector or IT sector. And she basically really said what everyone else there in the round said as well. Surround yourself with the right people and just believe in yourself and try to not listen to everyone else who says, hey, well, you're a girl, you can't do this, it's too technical, or, you can't do this, you just maybe look good, go and do something in marketing. Don't listen to this, just do your best and believe in yourself. And I know it gets tough at some points, but then really surround yourself with the right people who will believe in you and who will remind you of this, because there are times that are tough and you'll forget about this, but that's when you have your friends and role models and mentors that come in and help.
Thanks, Suzanne. Damana, did you have any sort of experiences around feeling like you're held back because of your gender or feeling the need to adopt different behaviours to cope in a male-dominated team or industry?
Oh, absolutely. In the first few years of working, I tried to blend in as much as possible. That's very hard when you're a girl. I started dressing differently and trying to hide the fact that I was female because that made it easier. Well, I thought it did. And then one day I realised I had a great mentor who was very glamorous. And she encouraged me, almost beat me out of it. And now I have a massive love for shoes. And I realized that when I embraced who I was and I just owned it, that other people were okay with that too. A lot of it was me trying to deal with being different and standing out. So yeah, I've had a lot of that kind of thing. I've also learnt that there is a skill in knowing when to fight and knowing when to walk away. There are some people that you will never change. There are some people who have too much control over your life and you won't be able to change the way they treat you or think about you. And you have to go and find a place where you belong. That's for everybody, male or female, but it's certainly true for a woman. And I've found that larger organizations have a lot more structure in them, and they seem to have a place for women, and it's easier to find that place in them. While smaller companies, I've found a lot more of a challenge. Yeah, I guess everyone has those challenges, and I've kind of learned how to deal with them over 13 years. Maybe in 20 years or something, I'll be an expert.
If you've had 20 years in with
She's got to be looking at Michelle and I. Yeah, now let's ask the old folks. Yeah.
I was so not saying that.
No, it wasn't you.
25, 26 years in the ICT industry, and it is a very different place to where I first started. Yeah, very different place. that there just wasn't females around. But that meant that I actually did better than the men because I was in sales and I had a different skill set. I had empathy, and I never had to compete with the customer technically. As long as I made sure that I gave that customer what they needed and solved their problem, then I was always in great demand. So I found it to be an absolute advantage in the early years. There's been times where I've worked in male-dominated companies where you find yourself turning into them, and I didn't like that, so I left. You have to be true to yourself. And customers, and I deal with customers every day, they don't really care whether I'm male or female. They just want me to solve their problem. And if I do it better than anybody else, then I'm just fine.
Look, and it's been in the industry a similar length of time to Michelle, and it's changed a lot. There used to be an industry show, the CBIT now, it used to be like in those days, PC92, PC93, it was this PC show down at Darling Harbour, and all the vendors were there. And the girls in bikinis getting out. I mean, that was what it is. All the demo dollies and the short skirts and they how they portrayed women in the IT industry 20 years ago was actually not a healthy model in my mind. And it's funny, we have to watch ourselves not to be desensitized, not to be desensitized to what media projects. It's still not brilliant, and I'm just going to do a plug for a fantastic documentary I love. It's called Misrepresentation, and if you haven't seen it, just watch it. That is, and it really talks a lot to how the media portrays women, and in fact how in some ways we've become a little desensitized to it. And it was a really good wake up for me. But yes, I've had that. I've been in a situation where I've been in a group of peers and I've been the only woman, and suddenly I'm the person they're asking to get coffee, So I've had those experiences. And the only discernible difference I can have is that I was, a female. And so I've been through that, but it's toughened me up, It's given me a little bit of resilience. And through the end of the day, what I came to is I don't control anybody else's conscious or unconscious bias. I don't. Michelle might not like blondes, in which case, even though mine's not all real, I'd be out of luck, Andrew might not like people from New Zealand, in which case I'm out of luck again. So, and he might be aware of it, he may not be aware of it. But I control one thing. I can control myself. And if I spend my time oriented towards the glass ceiling and the things that hold me back, I don't think I put my energy to good use. What I have to focus on is the sticky floor. And that's what I observe in women, is actually we're our own worst enemies at times, and we're holding ourselves back. We're not taking the confidence to put our own foot forward. We're not asking. We're not saying, hey, I can do that. And there's another plug, is a book called Women Don't Ask. And it talks to the psyche of women and why, in some ways we are like we are. And when I recruit and hire people, it is the guy who pushes me harder for, salary negotiation, with the exception of Michelle. The guy who says to me, I want this title, I want this, and they do that. It is the males on my team who are more proactive, saying, what do I have to do to get promoted? I'm ready for a promotion. So men do that. I have no problem with a guy doing that. I just need to find, therefore, I need to be more proactive, encouraging the woman on my team to do that. So I think it's important for us to look at ourselves, the role we take, how we contribute to those scenarios, and to really focus on our strengths. Because like Michelle, listening, empathy, nurturing, connection, generally those tend to be stronger in women than men. And I think if you think about client-facing roles, they have just done a great service for me over the years.
Okay, yeah, I'd really like to use the glass ceiling and the sticky floor analogy to move into our last poll question for the audience. So audience, if you're in front of your screens, I just want you to have a look at this question. What do you believe is the biggest barrier to women progressing in the IT industry? And like before, there is an option for other suggestions. And so I would love to, after this question, I'd love to open up the floor for all of you to come off mute, and we'll have an interactive discussion around this question as well as any others that have come up in the course of the event. Okay, so the votes are coming in. I'm just going to make sure that everyone can see the results. So we've had a number of votes for a perception that women don't grasp technical concepts. Juggling professional workloads, we've got other suggestions as well. So who was the one who voted for other suggestions? Again, not to put you on the spot, but we'd love to hear what they are. Oh, for teams. Fantastic. I'll take you off mute. And, what from your experience or from what you've observed, what do you think has been the biggest barrier, either for yourself or for other women that you've worked with?
Actually, I'm thinking there's no barrier for women. I don't think it's anything like, just stopping us. We can send our resume to anyone that's looking for a job, and then a male can do it. It's like, I don't think there's any barrier for us, and that's it, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's a really interesting point of view. How about the people who went for that the IT industry appeals to women, but there's a perception that women can't grasp those technical concepts? I mean, is that coming from personal experience? If you'd like to come off mute and share your story of when people have perceived that you weren't technically competent, we'd love to hear it. Yeah, Janine, do you want to join in? We can hear you slightly.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sure, I'm happy to share this one. It troubles me a little bit. Part of my job is teaching people how to use software to do research, and so I regularly go to different sites where the software's installed, supposedly ready for me to run the training, and each time you turn up, you're never quite sure what you're going to get in terms of how the computers have been set up, have you got access to what you need, does the software actually work, those kinds of things. And I have had many experiences where I have turned up on site and the software hasn't been installed correctly. And I have tech guys sort of fighting with me saying, I don't know what I'm talking about, and how would I know, and we installed it properly, and all of this kind of thing. And after about half an hour, 45 minutes explaining that I actually have a PhD in IT and I have a background, and it's only when you say one little thing like, I went to Griffith University, and they say, oh, I went to Griffith, so, oh, you must be okay. And it's kind of like you have to prove yourself over and over sometimes, and it's just, I mean, I'm prepared for that now. I know what I'm talking about, so I'm okay to stand up. But I know it's quite intimidating if you're not so confident. So just, like you're saying, believe in yourself and know what your abilities are and just stand your ground and don't let them sort of put you off, I think.
Yeah, that's very true. Sarah, I saw you were typing a message. Sarah, or anyone else on the call, did you want to share your experience of having experienced any of these barriers?
Sure, I'm happy to. I represent some of the women at Microsoft, and I often get comments where they'll go into a situation where they're helping a client out regarding their technical needs, and the person will look at them and say, where's the man? Am I dealing with you? And, after a time, it does get tiring, but they need to prove themselves within that first half an hour or that first half a day, and using skills like empathy, compassion, listening skills, and really win over the client. And then they, usually, or most of the time, it's a win-win situation where they go, she's fabulous, we're so happy that she came. But it's just that initial looking them in the eye and going, oh, is that who we've got? And then having to prove themselves. So it's a story that I do hear from time to time.
Yeah, that's still quite sad, and that happens in this day. So I have a message from our participant Sarah, who says, I didn't have any trouble in uni. In fact, I was kind of idolized. It wasn't until I was in the workforce that I noticed the gender inequality. Male colleagues were promoted and mentored with preference. Several times supervisors freaked out when I tried to touch the hardware. Sarah, do you want to, I'll take you you off mute, did you want to have a chat to us about some of your experiences?
Doesn't have a microphone.
Oh, it doesn't have a microphone. Okay. Well, thanks very much for sharing your story through the messaging. I mean, it's kind of reflected in the stories that Sarah told and Damana told and Janine, about people just not having that initial trust or confidence in you, just because they perceive that you're a woman.
It's interesting. I just want to maybe add to it, and I don't know your experience, Sarah. So one of the things that I have, or a belief that I hold, is actually most people that I come into contact, the majority, have good intent. They're not sitting there going, you're a woman, you're an idiot, or you come from this racial background, this skin color, this religion. Most people, I think, come with good intent. I think truly something that everybody holds, me included, is an unconscious bias. And I think that, and I'm not excusing, by the way, I say most people, there are of course conscious biases out there and people, who are very conscious about it. But I really think more and more as we're seeing things occur, is people aren't even aware sometimes about the filters that they have on. That's seen that their success as a white middle-aged man, just to pick on them, Andrew, is that works for them, and the people around them who are successful are other white middle-aged men. So without them being conscious, maybe I'm just going to look for another white middle-aged man to hire. And I don't think that was on the JD for them, must find that. But when they're in that recruitment process, that stands out because it's like me, and I can connect with somebody like me. And we all like to connect with people like ourselves. And so I think really as we evolve, in our careers and as we evolve in our businesses, we've got to be able to raise that up and say, right, how are we making sure that we test ourselves for our unconscious bias? Okay, how do I make sure I've built in a system around me that, challenges my unconscious bias? How are we doing things that make, in the recruitment process to make sure our candidates are seeing a diverse pool of people recruiting them? So we've got diverse people looking at potential candidates to break that down. And so I do think, there is that intentional, and I think regretfully some of the more troubling in some ways is the unconscious bias, because people don't know how to deal with that as naturally. And sometimes when you're consciously experiencing something like you did, Sarah, it's actually really crystal clear. That was absolutely, who thinks a woman can't touch the hardware? Well, that's a bit insane. But there are other times that it's harder to get under the cover from, and as I've sort of progressed, I think that's the thing that the unspoken and the unaware, that you've got to sort of challenge yourself on how to deal with that.
Damana, are you on the line? Did you have something to add to what Pip said about those unconscious biases?
Yes, I also think there's a positive thing to being different. My heritage is that I'm half Papua New Guinean. I'm short. I have long braids. I don't always conform. Now, if I met Andrew and he met 500 other people, I think he'd remember that girl with braids. And I've been in interviews where the fact that I did as well as anyone I interviewed with, I still stood out because, like Pip said, there might have been, 6 other middle-aged white guys. And they'll say, oh, do you remember that girl we interviewed or that woman we interviewed? And I think there's a positive side of it as well. And there's nothing wrong with uniqueness. And I think the world is changing a lot from when I started. And it's actually a good thing. I don't know. I'd be willing to hear what Andrew says on that anyway.
Totally, Damana. I mean, more and more organisations are understanding the power of diversity, and it's not just, well, we should do this because it's the right thing. There's a very robust business case. If you want to look at some good data, look at the Harvard Business Review. They've got some great ammunition about why diversity helps companies. And all the big guys, they get it now. So they're really active about trying to improve the diversity, not just gender, but age, ethnicity in their workforces, because it makes their businesses more robust. So in a sense, it's a great time to be coming into this industry. We are not as diverse as we should be. Most of the big organisations realise that, and they have a real appetite to try and increase their diversity. So conversely, we're probably more focused and more interested in having discussions with groups such as Geek Girls because of that very fact.
the team says she totally agrees with Damana, and that's excellent. So I'd love to open it up to anyone who'd like to ask any general question of our panelists in the last 5 to 10 minutes of our virtual event. So let me just take a few of you off the mute setting. And if you have any question, feel free to just say it, or if you want to put it in the instant messaging window, go ahead and do that as well.
I have a question. It's from Rebecca. She had to leave a bit early, but she wanted to put forward a question to Andrew and Pip. How would you approach how would you approach someone if you would like them to become a mentor? Yeah.
You want to first go at that, Pip?
Yeah, look, that is a really good question, okay, because in some ways, candidly, the first mentor relationships that I had almost happened organically, through, a connection and mutual respect and somebody's desire to help. So I was at the start, most of my mentor relationships were a bit more organic. Over time, as I've become more self-aware of my challenges, I've tried to be a little bit more deliberate about finding someone who can help me with a certain experience, or time of life I'm going through, or business, focus I need to do. And so, regretfully, I don't suffer from wallflower syndrome, so I'm sort of pretty upfront, and I generally find, if I ask, and I've generally got it, I'm generally not asking a stranger, by the way, because it's very important for me in that relationship is somebody I have a connection with and somebody I trust. My old boss, signed me up for a mentor with somebody, and it just didn't work. I had no connection with them. I started not looking forward to the phone calls. That's just not a healthy relationship. You really have to make sure it's, somebody you've got a connection with, somebody you can trust. And over time, I've targeted people who I have that with, but who I feel can actually help me with a certain thing I'm working on. So I'm pretty upfront with that request and the area that I want, us to explore in that relationship.
Yeah, I think that last point, Pip, about being very clear about what you expect out of a mentor. They say that a good mentor can only probably handle 4 mentee relationships if they're doing it properly. It's a heavy investment of time, and you really have to be prepared to accept a lot of, very, very hard messages sometimes from your mentor. But don't pick, just because Pip's GM doesn't, she'd be a great mentor, she certainly is now, but don't always go for those super high profile people. The mentor could be somebody sitting next to you even. It doesn't have to be somebody more senior, but be clear about what you want. And those relationships don't work. I think that's really true. And sometimes both sides need to recognize that it's just not going where we want it to. And you should change mentors as you grow and learn.
I agree. I always tell people I mentor, I have a use-by date. And actually we have a check-in. I always put in the calendar for 1 year later. So a year into that relationship, we check in and say, is this still the best partnership? Should we both be progressing in that? I agree not to have too many. The other thing I found is generally because of the role I have, not the person I am or the knowledge I have, I get asked a lot. And I used to really struggle with it because I want to help, and I feel very honoured that somebody has asked me. But actually, to Andrew's point, I found at one point I had too many, and I wasn't being good to any of them. And so the point of the realisation I came to is actually I'm not always the best person to help them. And then in the role I can take at that point is how do I help find them a better fit? Somebody who's actually got what they need versus sometimes people just look at the title. And that's why I think Andrew raises that point. It's a really important point. Be clear what you want and don't just go for somebody with a title.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that question, Alex. Thanks for letting us know Rebecca had that question. We have time, I think, for maybe one more question. Would anyone like to jump in with a question for our panelists? Okay.
Guys are quiet.
Yeah, suddenly gone quiet.
The final question, it's always a death knell, isn't it?
No, I want to take that last question. Crickets, that's right. Oh, yeah. Delasha, what's your question? No, we can't actually hear you.
Yeah, you're off mute, but we can't hear you, Delasha. So maybe you just want to type it out quickly.
Okay.
Are you out?
We got you.
Yep, we can hear you now.
All right. Sorry about that. So I had a question about the recruitment process. I was wondering if there's any difference if someone would like to apply, for example, for a research position compared to a normal project management position, for example. Is there a difference in the recruitment process?
I'll take that question because I have a very diverse team and really the recruitment process is not different. It depends on what it is that you want to do. Certainly make sure that you apply for the right role and what you want to get into. But generally we run fairly similar recruitment processes. We have 2 or 3 interviewers. Andrew can probably talk to this more than I can. And we go through a fairly rigorous process. We want to make sure that we're very fair in the way that we recruit people, so everyone goes through pretty much the same process.
Yeah, it has to be transparent and has to be the same process. It depends on the role. There may be, like for example, software engineer, we're going to have some actual testing. We'll probably give you some coding questions, which you have to sort through. Alignment with the values of the organisation and, a good cultural fit and a good fit for the type of people agenda we have is really critical. So a lot of the time will be spent on hearing from you what your thoughts about teamwork and areas like that. That's a really important part. Passion is something that we look for, passion for technology, passion for our customers and partners. This is a number of areas, and mostly you'll find if you get online and look through some chat sites around recruiting at Microsoft. But it is hopefully an experience where it's enjoyable for both the candidate and for us. We try and make it a really value-add process for both sides. Oh, nice to go on out.
Well, that's a good way to end our virtual event, all the lights having turned off. I just wanted to thank all of you very much for attending our virtual event, and we really hope that you found it insightful and a valuable use of your time. I know that Alex from Geek Girls will be in touch with you to distribute a evaluation form, so please watch out for that. And from all of us panelists, we've really enjoyed having you during our event.
Light's gone out again. I forgot to pay the bill. Sorry.
The building is trying to tell us to get out.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.